Hello, good afternoon, good morning. We're just waiting for a few seconds. We've already opened the webinar, so everybody can join. Well, and there we go. Well, welcome for the second session of this webinar, launch webinar for ContentGrid. We have especially tuned this to the US working hours, so we have a few guests from the US that can attend the webinar and also get this information firsthand via us. Just sharing my screen. There we go. Who are we? Well, first of all, of course, we're people from Xenit, a alfresco integrator since long time, and a content service provider for many customers of ours. My name is Ronnie Timmermans. I'm one of the founders and the managing director of Xenit, and you will hear some contributions of Jean-François de Klerk, our Chief Solution Officer, Ludo Wijgaarde, our Chief Revenue Officer, and last but not least, Thijs Lemmens, our Chief Technology Officer, who will take the larger part of the presentation of ContentGrid itself on his account. Why ContentGrid? Well, first of all, why did we start being an alfresco integrator? We are an integrator since 2007, since the founding of the company. And I think today we can claim to be in the top 10 of best-in-class partners for managed services and scaling alfresco. So we're really specialized in scaling archives, active archives, content systems that need to operate at 10 million, 100 million and more documents in the system. We have been open source friends from the very first days. Look at the wonderful technologies brought to us by Postgres community, Spring, Elastic, etc. Elastic even returning to a real open source license model recently. That was also why we are so enthusiastic to step into the open source enterprise content management world as an integrator. But of course, since we started in 2007, things have changed, and they have changed importantly in a sense that the world of ECM, the all-rounder packages, has split into the world of collaboration, which is Microsoft 365, and the world of transactional and system of records. So there is this people working together intensively on documents, even in parallel. That kind of process, very intense, very chaotic, very creative. That is taken by Microsoft 365, it's clear. And then there is the archive beneath that brings scale, that brings governance, and that's the world of the system of record, but also the transactional system. Many documents, 80%, 90% of documents with some customers and sectors and industries are created by processes, by systems, backend systems. And those documents need to find a spot in an archive, in a smart archive, so they are retained for as long as they need to be retained according to legal requirements. That has changed. Let's say that when we started with alfresco, you needed an all-round package to do it all, enterprise content management. Well, that world has been split into at least. Also, SaaS is the future and the cloud is there. Even in a bring your own cloud scenario that we support with ContentGrid, it needs to be serviced. It's not just about the building, it's not just about the software, it's about the service. And we think that today we started building ContentGrid about 2 years ago. Today, if you do that, it has to be cloud native, API first, and AI friendly. We also wanted as Xenit to control the source so we can guarantee end-to-end. We have been working together well with other providers, other technologies. In the context of ContentGrid, it gives us additional control about quality and scalability in cases where we think that ContentGrid focuses very well on the problem of our customers. ContentGrid is about scaling into 10 million, 100 million, billion, and billions of documents. And we have taken all precautions to make sure that we can scale very well. And it is fine to scale for 500 million, because for 50 million, you will know that you will be very fast. So it's better to have a bit of extra margin in your architecture. And then where do we build this for? Active archives. There are these systems, headless archives. They're very active for 5% of the documents that are part of your day-to-day processes, contracts, new customers, claims, work permits, whatever you're doing. And then these documents sync into the archive. They become part of the system of record. And those both types of content needs to be held together by ContentGrid. So for the agenda of today, we're going to cover 5 things. We're going first to explain why we think that the semantic foundation, maybe an expensive term, what it means is expressive concepts like entities and relationships are the basis to form an outstanding search experience, and ContentGrid is built upon that principle. As a consequence of these entities and relationships, you have attribute-based access control. Because ContentGrid has no folders, folders don't scale very well, not cognitively, not technically, so you need something else to use as a basis to attribute access control. Well, we're going to do that by attributes. After that topic, I think Thijs will tell something about scaling. First of all, how well can we scale in terms of larger archives, but also how can we scale down in terms of costs? That is important. There will be a small session by Jean-François in terms of integrating with Salesforce as one example of how easy it is to integrate ContentGrid with business applications. And we'll tell something about the app, the console, etc. This is also part of Thijs' presentation. One slide here, very briefly. Gartner released a few years or quite a bit of years ago an ECM maturity model. There hasn't been too many updates on this, so I'm using this model. What you see is ContentGrid tries to move you into level 5, which is a transformative content service. The reason for that is that that is the best way to do it, and even I think Gartner forgot a column. There's number 6, and that is cloud native content services. ECM transitions into that world. What we think, if you look at this Gartner quadrant and what is important to it, I think you can summarize it with a content service needs to be organization-wide, don't have silos. So it is consolidated conceptually, technically. It needs to integrate well with the business, so it should, in a sense, speak the language of the business. Change should be simple, because the world is changing all of the time. And an active archive is not a dead archive. There is a lot of useful information to exploit by AI and in other means to do much more with all your content. Gartner also says you need extensive meta tagging, then you are in the transformative level. What we say is with entities and relationships, you can even do more than meta tagging. You have a very clean model to create context for all your documents. Good. Where does my last slide, before we jump into the action and show you ContentGrid, where does ContentGrid fit in the larger IT landscape? Well, on top, you have a number of well-known business applications. Microsoft 365, a collaborative business application that serves to create project documents, maybe offers, analysis for customers, etc. It is a very free, open format business application. You have CRMs. We will show an integration with Salesforce, ERP, SAP, of course, Dynamics, etc. Business applications, or customers very often have a few vertical applications to cover things like claims management or pay slips or temporary contracts, etc., depending on the sector that you're in. And portals, of course, portals with maybe your partners, your suppliers, and certainly with your customers. And then there is ContentGrid that tries to create a layer to manage all the content related to the above business applications, inbound and outbound processes, and integrates with cloud services. What holds all of this together? That's a master data model. That is a conceptual model on how your business is organized. It speaks about the most important concept. It will always speak about customer. Let's say this is the number one and the most favorite concept for any company. We love our customers, so that is a binding concept. And it is known and represented in many of the systems. That concept is kind of shared, so you can organize all your documentation around the customer if you have a right model. There it is, customer as expected. Cloud native means that you don't have to build all the service, you can integrate services. That's what you can see on the right thing. It integrates with anything in the SaaS and in the cloud. Anything could be, why not, OpenAI? So you can do very clever things with all your content. OpenAI is a large language model. Your documents are large language. So you can exploit them. Of course, it requires that OpenAI will best do, or any other large language model, open source or whatever, it will do best when it knows the concepts that your business is about. This is also the language of your customer. Again, it also could be Hugging Faces. You have literally thousands of open source large language models and AI modules that you can use on Hugging Faces that you can integrate. Of course, you can download and run it on a private basis as well. And it talks to ContentGrid, and ContentGrid talks to all the other applications. And of course, your intelligent modules talk to that. ContentGrid is just a service app that should support your business, of course. That is kind of what I wanted to tell you, to introduce. In the next step, we'll go right into the action, and Thijs will show you a bit more about what content is, what ContentGrid is, how you can build it, and how you can use it.
Okay, thank you, Ronnie. Yes. Okay, I'm Thijs Lemmens, Chief Technology Officer. And before stepping into the action, first I'm going to explain some concepts, and then we'll show the console of ContentGrid and a little video on how we model applications in ContentGrid. And I'll do a live demo on using the end-user front-end navigator. So first of all, ContentGrid has two main platforms. The management platform, that's where we create and build our applications. And the runtime platform is where your applications are deployed to and where they run, where they serve the actual requests. What do we have on the management platform? Of course, the front end, the console front end that interacts with all the backend services. In the front end, we can organize our organization. So you can be member of multiple organizations. You can create an organization to create projects in, and you can invite your colleagues to your organizations to collaborate with. Inside the project, you have a blueprint, which is actually the blueprint of your application. It contains everything, not only the data model of your application, also the permissions, automations, and you can make a release of a blueprint. A release is actually a snapshot of your blueprint at a certain moment in time. Well, with these releases, we can go to the applications. You can define multiple applications for the same blueprint. So you can define a test application, an acceptance application, and a production application. So you can go through the stages you already know, and you can deploy a release first to dev or test, and then to acceptance and to production, to make sure everything works as expected, and also your integrations work as expected. So when you actually press the deploy button and you deploy a release, what will actually happen? Code will be generated. So not all clients are using the same code. The code that is created is based on your data model. You can download the code yourself. You can run it on your machine. You can test it there. You can run it on your own server. So you're not locked in. Everything you need to run the code, all the dependencies are also open source, and the code of the application itself is yours to download and build if you want. Of course, we create the code, we build a Docker image, and we deploy it for you on our runtime platform. The runtime platform, that can be one runtime platform, or we can have multiple runtime platforms. We currently have one platform available on Scaleway, but we can have a platform available on AWS or Azure in the right availability zone if necessary, or work with a bring your own cloud option where we can set up a runtime platform on your own infrastructure. Runtime platform runs on Kubernetes management platform also. In the runtime platform, we have two types of components. The ones in the fat on the bottom are the ones that are specific for an application. So as I already told, the API is the Docker image that's actually generated for you. So that's a different app. And then we need, every application needs their own database and an object storage bucket, which is S3. Other components on the runtime platform are the Navigator frontend, which I will show you later. There is also an API gateway that's needed because multiple applications are running on the same runtime platform. A request comes in the gateway, and the gateway will look at the request and route it to the right application. There is a module for authentication. We work with Keycloak, and we can integrate with Azure Directory or other OIDC compatible providers. And there's authorization. So the permissions will actually be translated to open policy agent policies, and we will use open policy agents to evaluate your requests. There's a webhook system, so we can act upon events like create, update, delete, and you can get a webhook when that happens and run your own code against it. And there are also usage metrics that are collected. Also on the management platform, you can manage users, groups, and attributes, but the actual realm is run in the runtime platform in a Keycloak. All right, let's go and dig into the console itself. First, I'll give you a short overview of the console. So I'm now in the ContentGrid console, and I selected the organization that I created for this webinar, and I have one project inside that. This is the contract management project. A project has blueprints, and a blueprint can have releases. So I have 4 releases here. This blueprint is already selected because there is only one. So this is actually the blueprint of our application. And now digging into this blueprint, you can see there's a data model with 4 entities. An entity can have attributes and relations, and attributes can have types. Also, I can show a scheme of the data model I already created. There are 4 entities, and they are linked to each other through relation attributes. Then we have permissions. So later we will tell some more on the permissions that will also be covered in the video. And automation. So this is where the webhooks can be configured. That is not part of this webinar. Then we have applications. Currently we have one application that's used for the demo. But you can have multiple. So you can have multiple applications for the same blueprint. And here you can see there are some links to the front ends and the APIs that we'll cover later. And there is also a history of deployments. And here's the user management part, IAM. We have one realm, and here we can manage attributes, groups, and users. So this was a quick overview of the console. Now I will show you a little video demo of how a model was created. So back to the organization project dashboard here, but without a project. We'll create a project. It's a contract management project. And then we go immediately to the data modeling. We'll add a first entity called party. And we'll add a first attribute name for the party, which is text. We want the text to be unique, required, and searchable and safe. The party will also have a type. Type is a special attribute. We don't want it to just have any possible value. We want to define some options. So we add an allowed values constraint, and the first option is customer. Can be also vendor or partner. And later we'll see that coming back in the drop downs in the front end. We'll add a contract entity. It goes a bit faster now because it's the same with a name, searchable name. And content. Content is a special attribute for storing the files. And then an effective date. So that will be a date type. And of course, those dates are also searchable. Then status. That's also allowed values. So we make the choice to draft active and expired. Add another attribute, audit. This is a special field. Why? Because it's actually 4 fields. Wait, go back. Audit metadata is 4 fields. And they are filled in and managed automatically by ContentGrid. It's a creator, creation date, modifier, and modified date, which are managed automatically because you don't want to fill in your own modification date when you modify something. I'll show that later in the UI. Then we have a product. A product has a name which must be unique, and a description, and that's not required. And the last one will be an invoice entity which is called number, but it's still text because it can contain letters. And it must be unique and searchable. It's required. An invoice also has a date and must be searchable. And an amount, which will be a decimal, which is another type. Decimals can also be searchable, of course. And we shouldn't forget to add content for invoice, or otherwise we cannot attach our files to it. Next is going to be, now we defined all the entities and attributes, but not the relations yet. Invoice, we want to relate it to a party, and we want to say this is the invoice for a customer. And we want multiple invoices per party, but not the other way around, because it says only one customer and the relationship is required. Then we'll add some more relations to the other entities, like a party has multiple contracts, and a contract has multiple invoices, and a contract has only one and exactly one product, but a product can have the other way around, multiple contracts attached to it. And that's about it for the relations. And now we can show the scheme, which is the same as we have shown before. So all the attributes we defined and their relationships. And we can put it in full screen mode. Okay, so this is not a complete application yet, or a complete blueprint yet. We don't have permissions yet, which will be important. But before we do that, we need to actually provision an application, because then we can go to IAM and add some attributes, groups, and users. So we add first a new application, and we give it a name, webinar demo, and we choose a deployment target, which is now the default. The deployment the target is actually linked to the runtime platform. So what happens now in the provisioning step, it's a fast forward, is we'll create a database for the application, and we'll create, if there's no realm for the organization yet, we'll create the first realm to do the IAM management. And also an S3 bucket will be there. They will be empty because the application has not been deployed yet. It's just the dependencies that are provisioned. So now we'll go and manage some attributes and users. Little remark, I manage attributes, groups, and users here in the user interface, but we can integrate with Active Directory or other providers, so you don't have to copy everything from your Active Directory here. And also the login can be done with an external provider. First attribute we will add is admin. I want to define if a user is admin or not, and we do that with an attribute, which is a Boolean, and it's not multi-value, it's just true or false. And now I want to explain what permission I want to add later. In my application, we have invoices. Those invoices are for customers. Now, I want to expose the invoices to my customers. So when a user logs in, I need to know what customer is it for. And then I can only show the invoices that are for that customer. We can do that with an attribute. We call the attribute customer, and it will be a text attribute. It will be multi-value because a user could belong to multiple customers. Now, before creating users, we want to organize them in some groups. The admin group. And here we can actually assign values to the attributes. So in the admin group, the user admin, the attribute admin will be set to true for the users in the group. Now we will create two groups for customers, customer bright future, and we will put the name of the customer, the full name of the customer, in the value of the attribute. In this case, bright future innovations. And we do the same for another customer, tech savvy, customer tech savvy solutions. And now we can go and create some users and assign them to groups. First, I'll make an admin user. I'll make myself admin. And I'll add myself to the admin group. Groups are still there. And now we'll add a bright future user and add it to the bright future group. And now a little fast forward, we add the tech-savvy user, Frank tech-savvy, already done, and we'll add him to the tech-savvy group. So now we have 3 users, and they will get either the admin is true attribute, or the customer and then the name of the customer attribute. This allows us to start defining permissions. By default, ContentGrid applications have no permissions, which means even a user that is logged in cannot do anything in the application because he has no permissions. The first easy permission I like to add is the admin permission. The admin users can do everything on an entity. In this case, for the party entity, can read, create, update, and delete. How do we do this? Well, we will attach the user attribute, admin, and say it has to be true. And that's it. And now we will fast forward and do it for the other entities as well. Done. So we skip that part because it's the same. And now we will add the permission we need to give our customers access to their own invoices. Access to their own invoices, that means only read access. So we uncheck the other boxes. And now we can attach the user attribute customer. And customer is a collection, so it's contains, not equals. And we'll attach it to, well, it's not directly attached to an attribute of invoice because the customer name is under party. So we follow the customer relation and we say we will link it to the name of the customer. So this is essentially a basic ABAC rule, attribute-based access control rule, that goes over a relationship. All right. And now we can actually make a release. We will make a version 0.0.1, add a remark to it. And before submitting the release, we will check if the actions that were taken in the changelog are the ones we expect. Again, on the release page, we can see the same thing. And now we can decide to deploy our application. We select the application. We have only one, but if you have like the acceptance and production environments, you can select which one. And again, we see the change log and we can actually deploy. Okay. So now what happens behind the scenes? We already skipped the step 1 was the code generation, but that's pretty fast. And the second step, build, that means that the code will be built into a Docker image. And then we'll fast forward. Once that's done, it will be deployed to a Kubernetes cluster. And now we're waiting for it to be started and available. And it's available. So it's ready now. So it takes about 1 or 2 minutes to get the application up and running. And now we see some links here to Navigator, OpenAPI, and HAL Explorer, but I'll do the rest of this demo live. So we'll get back to the same screen here. Back to the application. I'll first show the OpenAPI specification. I have to log in. Oh. I'll log in as webinar admin. So you can see ContentGrid is API first. So we have a nicely generated API for all the entities to get all the results, also to create new entities. Everything is here. So it's an open API specification with the UI. Some of you might know this. And we have another API specification in HAL. So this is the HAL Explorer, more technical interface. But let's now jump immediately to the Navigator front end. I'll log in. Okay, on the left side, hand side of the Navigator, we see our 4 entities. Let's start with parties. If I click parties, I see a search form with the metadata we selected that needs to be searchable. Also the metadata of the relations that are searchable. So the contract's name, effective date, status. And in the status, we see that drop down because we configured those allowed values. So if you want to see, for example, the parties that have expired contracts, we can do so. And we have 2, but both of them now have expired values. Then if we go to contract, we have the same thing. We can also follow the relation product for a search. So we can search all contracts for a certain product. Let's do that. So let's show all the products and let's search all the contracts for product content grid. So that's possible in this form. 84 contracts. And then we have the invoices, the same. If you want to create new entities, there is a create form on the right hand side, and we can fill in all the metadata, also the non-searchable, of course. And important, we can actually make the relations by searching for the right customer. In this case, we have 2 customers. Okay, so in ContentGrid, we have these relations. They are very handy. Why? Because I can now go and search for a customer. Of course, we have only 2, so I searched in the wrong field. Customer tech-savvy solutions, I can go into the details and I can follow to contracts. So I see all the contracts of this customer. Can go a bit further. Now I see the contracts for tech-savvy solutions, and I can go a bit further and see the details of a specific contract. You have a preview here, and I can see it's this contract is about the product CloudSphere. You can also see all the invoices. I can dig deeper into the invoices, and that way actually you can navigate through the content quite easily. These are the invoices. If I go back now, what you can see here is also the metadata for this contract. It's created by a technical user. In this case, it's automatically filled in. So this is not a readable username. That's because it's a technical user. There's a creation date, a modified date, and which is the same user now. The last modified by. So this metadata is automatically recorded. That was not provided by this technical user itself. If we now go back to the invoices and we show them all, if I click on one, we get the preview on the right hand side. So let's now show how the permissions work. Now I'm logged in as my own user, which is the admin user, and I have 1664 results. Now when I log out, I can go back to the application. I'm going to log in as the Bright Future user and go back to invoices. I only see a part of the invoices, and if I randomly pick one and go to the details of this invoice, I can look at the customer. It will always be Bright Future Innovations because of the ABAC rule we set. And the same will be true for the tech-savvy user. You will only see tech-savvy solutions documents. And I think that concludes the demo of the Navigator. and I'll stop sharing my screen and switch back to the presentation. Yes. So we saw now a little bit how ContentGrid works. There's a lot more to it, but this is a short demo. But we also tested the performance of ContentGrid. So we did two types of tests. We did a test with 100 million documents, and we wanted to know how fast is it on queries. And we did another test where we tried to load as many documents as fast as possible, and we went up to 500 million documents. First, the 100 million document query performance test. This test was based on statistics of a real customer's data set and their query patterns. We used a database with 8 vCPUs and 32 gigs of RAM, so quite some slack, and the application server of the same size. And the results are here. We did 25 concurrent requests. That means 25 requests at one time. So there's no waiting time. Once one query is done, the next one will follow immediately. So that's more than 25 concurrent users. And we did it with page sizes of 100 documents. And there are 4 categories here. The result sets of less than 100 documents, 0 documents, more than 100 documents, and that's divided in the results where we fetched the first page and the second page. And the average response times we can see is going from 10 milliseconds to 250 max. So that's still quite fast. And even the 99th percentile is 25 milliseconds to 350 milliseconds. And of course, the request rates are adapted accordingly. So that's it about the first 100 million document query performance test. And then we executed a ingestion test with a slightly bigger database, 2 gateways and 2 API servers, but those are quite small spec'd. Also on the database, we have quite a bit of room. We use the file size of 1 kilobyte, which is small, but we don't want to test the S3 object storage behind ContentGrid. We want to test the application itself. And we reached ingestion rates from 500 documents to 900 documents a second. And that means that we actually still got those 500 to 900 docs a second at the end of the load. So even with 500 million documents, you can expect this kind of performance with ContentGrid. We didn't see a real decline. The database could still cope well. Why is that? 500 million documents in a table in PostgreSQL. It's large, but it's not that large for a database. If you give it enough resources, it can easily cope that. Now I can, I think, conclude my part of the presentation and hand over to Jean-François.
Thijs. Thank you very much, Thijs, for this great presentation of the console and the way ContentGrid works. Now I would like to tell you a bit more about the integration of ContentGrid with your business applications. So I'm just trying to share my screen. Yeah. So we have here a demo of Salesforce integration that we have used as example. We developed this together with SuccessCraft. SuccessCraft is a company specialized in Salesforce development. So if you want to know more about them, you can look at the website, successcraft.com. So what Thijs showed in the demo is that, that automatically when you create a ContentGrid application, you will receive an API. So we call this API first. So if you paid attention, you could see we had an endpoint for invoices, for example, but also other endpoints. And those APIs we can use when we integrate don't know why my slide is not very well displayed. Yeah, when we integrate with the business applications. So what we do then, we want to position ContentGrid as an active digital archive, where you're going to have a long-term archive of all your content that you want to keep for a long time. But this will be connected with your business application. So we have different scenarios of business applications. It can be workflow applications like business process management, portals, inbound or outbound portals, some packages like Salesforce, SAP, Guidewire, Odoo. Then also collaboration applications like Microsoft 365. Email, we see also some scenarios with email archiving, or you want to exchange content via B2B gateways or even with mobile applications. Typically, we see that if we have an API of ContentGrid, there will be 3 ways to integrate it. Some of our customers or companies will do it via their internal middleware, like an enterprise service bus, when it's on their data center. Maybe we connect the API to their enterprise service bus. Now we see also new platforms coming in the form of iPaaS. So that's integration platform as a service. So those platforms run in the cloud and they offer a lot of connectors and ways to pass data back and forth between different cloud or internal systems. And then the third way would be to have a direct interaction between your business application and ContentGrid. So in the demo here, what we have prepared is a Salesforce example where Salesforce is then the business application. And there you will browse an account. Yeah? And we will see through the direct connection to the API that you can consult information about this account that is stored into the Active Digital Archive ContentGrid. Yeah? So one of the examples will be an invoice. So this invoice could come from outside or another application, and you will expose it into Salesforce. So I'm going to show you the demo. So I need to log in into Salesforce. Yeah. So when you log in into Salesforce, as I said, we are going to show what content is available for accounts. Okay. But before I jump into showing you the content, I'd like to show you this tab, which is the settings tab, which shows the power of having an information model, in fact. So you see those entities, claims, contract, accounts, contract, invoice, in fact, are entities that are into the ContentGrid model of the ContentGrid application. So our connector is able here to discover, if you want, those entities and say, oh, I can connect this entity to an account if you want. Then further, so you see the entities here, we can configure which attributes should also be visible. So for example, an invoice can have a total amount, can have a document, so that's an attachment, can have different attributes. Yeah? So you will select which one you want to see and to be synchronized with your Salesforce. So once this is done, so that's more for administrators to configure this, then as a user, then you will simply go to your account, and in a very transparent way, then you will see that you have claims, because we had activated claims and invoices. I have claims attached and I have invoices attached. So then you say, okay, I found 5 invoices for my account Abu Dhabi. And then you can see this invoice here for the Great Consulting. You can look at the details, and then you will see that there is a document that is attached, which is an invoice. Yeah. So one of the functionality that you have is that you could say, oh, I've received another invoice by email, whatever. I can upload it. Yeah. So I will say this invoice is to be paid by next week. I put an amount that we will recognize. And I will say my webinar invoice. And the job was to give a great webinar. And I will, of course, upload a file. Yeah? So I have here, I think, no, in quick access, I have here file. So, and here, this is my invoice for the webinar. So don't worry, you will not receive an invoice for the webinar. It's just for the demo. So I can upload it. And you see, this is all done via Salesforce. Okay. So like I've added an invoice for my account and I've archived it and I'm happy. Now, what will happen is that in ContentGrid, I will in fact see it coming. So you see in the navigator, this is the model we have, and this model is also an invoice. And so if I go to the invoice and I show them all, then you will see that I will have somewhere this job, give a great webinar, yeah, with my webinar invoice. And if I look at what it is, I see that it's my Hello Webinar World invoice. Yeah. So from Salesforce, I could upload an invoice, and we go further into the connector. We're also able to say, hey, this invoice is connected, in fact, to an account entity. And so we copy the account so that for long-term archive, we still know, okay, this invoice was for this account. And then you see you have semi-technical metadata that allows to say, okay, but in Salesforce, this was this account ID. Yeah. Now, the last thing I want to show you as a demo is that you can also modify. So here we have our webinar invoice with 6666. Now I can edit it. Say, okay, in fact, it was more expensive. And I update it. And then if I go back to ContentGrid, and I see, normally I would say that my amount has been changed. Yeah. So what we see here is an example of Salesforce and ContentGrid integration. So why did we do that? So first, we are going to publish this connector on the App Exchange so that it can be used. You see from the meta model, you can configure simply the connector, so it's kind of generic. Yeah. And one of the reasons why we think it's interesting for the Salesforce customer is that we're able to have a lower cost per document than Salesforce itself. And that's also something that we want to have in general for ContentGrid, that the cost per document goes down. Then once your documents are archived and available in Salesforce, but into our platform, then ContentGrid, as you have seen, offers more capabilities. And so, for example, the APIs allow to integrate with other applications, inbound or outbound, but also, as Tess showed us, we can also add some security access control to those files in a better way than having just the simple file service of Salesforce. And what we have seen in building this connector with Success Graphs is that it was quite fast to do this integration. So this connector was easy to make before, or because our APIs are business APIs that are easy to understand and to integrate. Next subject I would like to present you now is the ContentGrid roadmap. So ContentGrid is our platform, and we continue to improve it every day. So I want to show you what we are doing in this quarter and next quarter, Q3, Q4. But if you look at from a bit of a distance, you will see that we're developing is about those bullets on the right. So we continue to develop search capabilities, AI capabilities, and this will be the subject of the next webinar. Will be dedicated to AI capabilities. Modeling, because you've seen, Tess has shown, we model, so we want to always improve the way we can model. Some security features, because of course we care about security a lot. Then the navigator, the user experience. Then the support for different cloud platforms. The integration of ContentGrid with other systems, also in a secure way, and the performance. So if we take a look at our roadmap in detail, I just want to show you what we do this quarter and the next one, otherwise it will be too long. But so we talked about the modeling. This one has been delivered. This is the list of values. So Tess show you that for a party type, we can say it's a customer or a vendor or a partner. This allows to put constraints on attributes. This one is an integration layer. Yeah? This integration layer will allow us to integrate with other systems in a secure way. So what you want is to pass authentication data so that when the callbacks are between some ContentGrid and other systems are secure. Then we have some AI that has been developed this quarter. We have a nice AI modeling assistant. This is a way to use AI to help you in building your model. So that's an accelerator for building your model. That's very nice to see. If you want to see it, contact us or come to the next webinar. Then we have also some integration. So Tess showed we have automations, and one of the automations could be to transform formats. So you receive a document in Word format, for example. Office, you want to publish it in PDF. So converters are integrated automatically and also in a secure way thanks to the integration layer. Then we continue to improve our search capabilities, like searching within strings, partial searches, and order by into the results, and so on. And then you have seen our Salesforce connector, which we want to publish on App Exchange in the next month. Then next quarter, we continue on search with full text search. Content encryption, that's more into the security topic that we want to have content encrypted at the application level. Content is already encrypted into S3 buckets, but we want them to be encrypted at the application level also. Then, of course, Navigator UI improvements. And then again, AI, ChatGPT, we do a lot of ChatGPT integrations to see how we can add AIs to documents, ask questions about documents, etc. So that's just to give you a flavor on our roadmap. And now I'll give the word to Ludo, who will do closing and Q&A.
Thanks, Jean-François. Ludo Wijngaarden, Chief Revenue Officer. Today we presented ContentGrid to you as an innovative platform. And we also saw, Thijs showed us that it scales very, very well. And it can easily be integrated with other business applications, as Jean-François mentioned, mentioning the integration with Salesforce. Meanwhile, the public chat has been open. Already a couple of questions arrived. One is regarding the integration to ERP systems with regards to Microsoft Dynamics. The question is, will documents from Dynamics be replicated or copied, or can it be used as an external storage? Standard integrated, or is this custom mode? And the same question goes for Microsoft 365. So Jean-François, probably a question for you.
Read the question again.
Yep.
So how does it integrate with the documents from Dynamics to be replicated or can be used external storage? Yeah. So I think it could be both. Yeah. So we can do kind of a dump of documents that would be in Dynamics. Yeah. But a deeper integration would be to in fact replace, like we do in fact here a bit in Salesforce, to not have the document in Dynamics, but have it delegation of the storage, if you want, in ContentGrid. But this is then an integration that we don't have yet, so we'll have to build it. But I would say what we experience there is that with a lot of packages that are modern, there are a lot of possibilities to quite fast do that kind of integration. That's what we see with Salesforce or other packages, that it's quite easy to implement because we have good APIs.
Okay, thank you, Jean-François. Another question we had in the previous session was regarding the pricing module of ContentGrid. In fact, it's a very predictable pricing model, and it's based on the number of documents. It's based on usage, in fact. It's based on the number of documents, the increase in documents, and the queries you do on top of that. So it's quite simple and predictable. It's not based on amount of users or whatever, or CPU based. It's purely based on your usage of the system. Any other questions? Let me check the chat session. No, if there aren't any more questions, I think then it's time to conclude this session. Thanks again for your participation. Take care.